Welcome to the Prison Professors program. I am Michael Santos, and I'm thrilled to be introducing you to my friend Scott Tucker. Scott, welcome to the Prison Professors podcast.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
Thank you. And what we are going to be doing now is a series of several episodes where we will tell the amazing story of Scott Tucker. Now, Scott, I've given an earlier episode where I kind of gave an overview, but for those of you who are tuning in right now for the first time, I'd like to ask Scott to elaborate a little bit on his career. Scott, tell us a little bit about the business that you built.
Well, primarily what we've been talking about, Michael, is in the late 90s, we started building an online lending platform. And back then, not many people were doing that. And we primarily focused on a short-term loan product, commonly referred to as the payday loan. And we took the internet and took that product and we built it into a multi-billion-dollar brand.
A multi-billion-dollar brand. Now, when you started that industry, tell us a little bit about what type of capital. Did you come from a background of the corporate sector, or were you just a real, true entrepreneur?
I would like to say that I came from a big finance background, but I really didn't. This was really a pure entrepreneur move. It was unknown. It was kind of like the Wild Wild West back then on the internet. And it was just when things were in the late 90s kind of getting introduced where people were doing things online. So we started with minimal cash, and that's how we started.
You started with minimal cash, and how many locations? Just a single location?
Yeah, in the beginning, we looked at doing the store model where you would have the specific stores in different areas, and then we migrated to doing everything online and really gave that a chance since nobody else was doing it. So we operated very similar to what a credit card company would do, and we operated in just one location, a main processing center, very similar to what a credit card company does.
You mentioned that you started in the 1990s. What was the trajectory of growth with an industry like yours?
Well, what we just kind of hit it at the perfect time with the internet and everybody going online. And then that was how we were able to scale it so successfully and so quickly, was with the internet marketing and the ease in operation of being able to do basically an online financial lending transaction with just some clicks.
And how many employees did you have with your company?
Well, we started with a couple, but at its zenith, just in the processing center alone, we had over 1,700. And then the surrounding companies that supported all that was probably about another 1,000. Again, if you were to put it into context, it would be about the same kind of size as a medium-sized credit card company.
So a medium-sized credit card company in size, which you said was generated billions of dollars in revenues over the course of your career. And all of those revenues that you created contributed enormously to the tax base of the United States, wouldn't you say?
That would be a very, very fair statement.
What would be the amount of taxes that you would say businesses like yours contributed to the tax code?
I would say over the period of time, everybody that was involved in all the different companies, it would be in the billions.
So billions of dollars contributing to taxes, and yet somehow all of those resources, in spite of all of those resources, you found yourself in the crosshairs of the federal government. Tell us a little bit about what it was like for you to learn that you were the target of a criminal investigation.
It was shocking, especially as we'd been in business for almost 20 years. And, we had what I would call an elite legal team that had been involved in our business almost all throughout. And it was, we didn't really know what to say. Obviously, we immediately addressed it, but it was shocking.
Well, what exactly happened? I mean, at one point, you're the CEO of a company that's doing north of $1 billion in revenues, kicking off hundreds of millions of dollars in profits that are funding police forces, fire departments, school districts, infrastructure building, all types of things. So I would think that with that level of success, you would have been a good corporate citizen, the darling of your community that's supplying jobs and really providing a lot. And yet you find yourself targeted. How do you learn that you're even the target of a criminal investigation?
Well, through this experience that I've dealt with for the past 5 years, what they do is they start reaching out to people around you. And that's how we found out about it.
What year was that?
The FBI started going and questioning people at their homes. A lot of people that work for us. It would January 2nd, 2014.
So in January of, well, let's take it back a year before then. So we're going to talk about 2013. At that point, what I want to just make sure that I understand, in 2013, you had no idea that anybody would ever accuse you of criminal behavior. Is that right?
That, with all the legal work that we've done in the past, that is a correct statement. Yes.
So what does that mean, all of the legal work that you have done in the past? Tell our audience a little bit about what that means.
Well, the age of the internet, all kinds of new things were happening, especially in the financial world. And the internet, created commerce, throughout every state in the country. And there was a couple civil topics that we had to deal with about where the venue of the loan was, who the lender was, what the federal preemption was, a lot of that. And we wove our way through the courts over the years to ultimately prevail in 2 state courts that pretty much said that the model of the federal preemption that we had with our banks and our clients was the correct one.
When you said that you had 2 state courts that presided over your business, were these civil matters or criminal matters as well?
Yeah, no, it was all civil. We had never had any inquiry about any type of criminal activity or criminal enterprise whatsoever over the 20 years.
And you said that you had all the legal work that you have done. Could you give our audience an understanding of how much you anticipate that you spent annually to law firms to provide you with this information that you were complying with the law?
Well, it's not uncommon for a financial services company the size that we were running with our clients to spend $10-15 million a year.
So you're spending $10 to $15 million a year on attorneys, and do they provide you with letters of opinion that would indicate their idea of whether you were operating within the bounds of the law?
Yeah, that was more probably 15 years ago when we started doing this. This was just normal activity that had been done by our teams of attorneys for the past 10 and 15 years. But yeah, in the early days, we went out and we got a lot of different opinions, basically vetting our theory and our business model.
And when you found out that you were that you were the target of a criminal investigation, tell us a little bit about what steps you took in anticipation of facing eventually a possible indictment.
Well, the first thing that we did is we flew to New York and we met with all of our teams of attorneys and said, this is what they're saying, et cetera. And then our attorneys wanted to get a meeting with all of the prosecutors and the FBI on this and, ask them, what's your inquiry about? What's your questions? So that's how it started. And we were pretty much stonewalled. And so it lingered on for several years of really not knowing what they were thinking or what they wanted to do.
But you anticipated at that time that it was a criminal matter and not a civil matter. Is that accurate?
Right. Yeah. It was deemed a criminal investigation.
And when you said that you reached out, were you reaching out with hopes of settling or creating some type of a cooperation agreement at that time, or what were you doing?
Well, no, we were reaching out to understand why is there a criminal inquiry on this? This is at best a civil issue like we've dealt with in the past. and to try to get an understanding of that. And that was very difficult to get from them.
So we're talking with Scott Tucker, who is one of the pioneers of the payday lending industry, and he's talking with us about what it was like to find out that he was the target of a criminal investigation after spending tens of millions of dollars in legal fees over the course of his career. Actually, I think he said that was an annual expenditure. So perhaps it was hundreds of millions of dollars that you spent in legal fees, and yet you still found yourself as a criminal defendant. Was there any I guess earth-shattering event in the Tucker family that let you know things were not going your way, and if so, when did that happen?
Well, there were several different things, unfortunately. A lot of the people that work for us over the years had worked for us for 10 and 15 years, and the thought of us being involved in any type of so-called criminal activity or criminal enterprise was just too much for several people that work for us to deal with, including my brother. And unfortunately, he just couldn't come to grips with that, and he took his life.
What were they pressuring your brother with? I mean, that must have been an incredibly difficult moment for him to be dealing with pressure to respond in that way. What were they trying to get him to do?
Well, we don't really know. I didn't really get to talk to him, and it was really a messed up time. But you can imagine how the brutal force that the government has, and they can say about anything that they want to scare and intimidate whoever they're coming after.
And how did you change the operations at your business in light of this scrutiny that the federal government was putting on your business?
Well, we didn't. The ironic thing about this is that we really didn't change anything. And believe it or not, as we speak today, the businesses are still up and going and doing very well.
So you were 100% committed to saying, my business is legitimate. There's nothing to hide from. I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm not going to cut and run just because some prosecutors are fishing around. Is that what we should understand?
That's exactly correct.
So you continued doing business just as as you had been doing. You struggled through the unfortunate event of losing your brother. What happened next?
Well, we didn't really know what was going on, and our attorneys had reached back out to the prosecutors, and there was really no activity in between us on discussing things. And then in February of 2016, they indicted us. They indicted myself and one of my attorneys.
You said February of 2016, you faced a criminal indictment. Was there any civil matter that was going on at the same time, and anything happening on that front?
Yeah, we had a couple civil matters that we took to the state Supreme Court in Colorado and California, and we won those unanimously. Then in 2012, after we won both of those cases, the Federal Trade Commission came in, and basically they were the so-called regulator of this industry, which really didn't have a regulator at the point, because online lending and online e-commerce was all something new. And they disagreed with some of our loan terms on some of our loan documents that we've been using for almost 15 years. And so we battled with them for about 6 months, and we came to an agreement where we made a small change of a number in a box. That's all we did.
Wait a minute. You said the Federal Trade Commission had some challenges with the loan documents that we're using. Were these the same loan documents that the state courts in Colorado and California that you just described had been looked over and vetted in the Supreme Courts of those states?
Yes, and what even makes it more troubling is that we had 2 other inquiries from the Federal Trade Commission in 2004 and 2007, and they looked at all of our documents, as well as talking with all of our attorneys who vet all of our documents, and they didn't have any problem with them.
So you
And
had every reason to believe that you were in compliance with the law on not only a civil matter, but also, but of course, I mean, not only a criminal matter, but in a civil matter as well. You had good reason to believe that you were operating within the scope of the law.
absolutely. And with the teams of attorneys that we hired that worked for us on a full-time basis, they managed all of that. And we had no thought that we were, doing anything that wasn't, per the rules. The TILA documents is what they're called, the truth in lending documents. And most of the other people in the industry had exactly the same documents, but they didn't pursue them.
So you said that you had in-house attorneys that were vetting these different legal opinions. Did you work with any outside attorneys as well?
Yeah, we had a full staff in-house of 7 full-time attorneys in-house, and not only did they manage day-to-day stuff, but we had a team of outside counsel that were experts in different fields, and they managed all of that also.
So, as the CEO of an enterprise that's employing thousands of people and generating billions of dollars in revenues, you are turning to your in-house legal counsel and your talented legal team, outside legal team as well, and making decisions based on those legal opinions. And yet, you still found yourself in the crosshairs of both the FTC and the DOJ.
That is exactly correct. And as most of the people that would probably be watching this, and people that run big organizations and have big legal teams, the bigger your operation gets, the more you rely on their expertise and their advice. And that's exactly what we did.
So when did the FTC, you'd mentioned that you got indicted in February of 2016. Tell us a little bit about the FTC's, when did the FTC come to a conclusion on its case?
Well, we were in the battles at the state Supreme Court in California and Colorado, and we won those unanimously at the Supreme Court in both states in February of 2012. Right after we won those, the Federal Trade Commission, they sued us on April 2nd of 2012, and we fought that. And that's when we came to an agreement with them in December of 2012 to make the change in the box. And that's when that started. It was April 2nd, 2012 with the FTC.
My question is, when did the FTC make its ruling, and what did it rule, or what did a judge rule in response to the FTC allegations?
Well, we made an agreement to make a change in the box on the Federal Trade Commission, and then after that, the lawyers tried to negotiate with them on a settlement amount, and that took. We didn't do that until 2015 with a couple of our lenders, and we did make a settlement with them, but they kept pursuing the case against me personally and my wife.
And did the FTC ever did the case with the FTC ever ultimately get resolved with a settlement?
No, we went there. The judge mandated an arbitration and a settlement agreement, and the FTC showed up and said they wanted $1.3 billion from me, and it was crazy. So it was the largest consumer case ever in the history of the Federal Trade Commission. And we did not settle with them, and we never had our day in court. The judge in Nevada just signed the order and put a judgment against me for $1.3 billion and about $30 million against my wife.
$1.3 billion against you and $30 million against your wife from the FTC. When did that very burdensome judgment come down?
We got indicted February 10th of 2016. March 30th, the judge in Nevada and FTC froze all of my money, including all of my defense money in my defense attorney's accounts. And then she rendered a judgment on September 30th of 2016 for the $1.3 billion and the $30 million.
So you have a judgment against you for $1.3 billion and $30 million. How is it that you're able to fund your trial after you were indicted in February of 2016?
Well, when we got indicted, we had reserve money in our attorney's trust accounts in the case of some type of indictment. And so all of our attorney teams were funded and ready to go if that came up. So after we got indicted, that really didn't affect anything. And then when the Federal Trade Commission put the freeze on us, they froze that money in all of our trust accounts for our attorneys. And ultimately they had to quit, and the judge in New York had to assign a public defender to my case.
Wait a minute. So you said that you had funded your entire legal defense prior to the asset freeze. Is that accurate?
That's correct. We had funded our entire legal defense in New York with the DOJ, as well as we had funded our entire appeal case with the FTC. And when she gave the order on March 30th of 2016, those monies that were in those trust accounts with my attorneys was frozen, and we could not access them, and the attorneys couldn't draw down to continue the case.
So the funds were in your attorney's trust account. May I ask, and I know you're not a lawyer, so you may not be able to answer this question, but it sounds like how much money did you deposit in the attorney's trust fund?
At that time, the various different accounts for the various matters, there was approximately 20 million.
So 20 million sitting in a trust account. What if, God forbid, I mean, you wouldn't have made this decision, but what if you would have asked the attorneys and said, let me just do a flat fee and release the 20 million to you? Could the FTC have gone after that funds then if it wasn't sitting in a trust account?
No. If it was a flat fee arrangement and I paid it, they couldn't have frozen that. But over the years, we had never worked on any type of flat fee arrangement. And as most people know, you fund the trust account and they draw down on it based on the activity for the month. But it's in their account specifically for this purpose.
So that's some good advice for anybody who's watching this program and thinking that if they've prepaid their legal fees, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get your attorney of choice. It sounds like the government can always go after that trust fund. And that's a very valuable nugget we've heard from Scott Tucker.
I would highly recommend that.
Pardon?
I would highly recommend, if you think something like that's going to happen, that you discuss it with your attorneys and you do some type of flat fee arrangement and you get them paid and earned.
Yeah, that is some very good advice. Now, Scott, you said that once they froze your assets, you had a $1.3+ billion judgment against you. You couldn't hire attorneys of record. I think I heard you say that the judge appointed counsel. Tell us a little bit about your experience of going to a trial on a complicated matter involving billions of dollars. How many loans did you have outstanding over the course of your career?
How many billion?
How many loans did your business generate?
Billions.
Billions of separate individual loans or millions of separate loans?
Millions of separate individual loans. We had over 15 million customers, my clients and I, in this business. And
so 15 million customers, millions of separate individual transactions, and you had to go to trial with a federal defender?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, as you can imagine, it was almost unbelievable because, over my career, we always had a very fine team of attorneys that worked for us, and most of them had been working for us for 10 or 15 years. So the thought of me not having the team with me and getting brand new public defenders, it's hard to even describe the thought of that. But the judge in New York did not want to put the trial off and see if we could settle something with the Federal Trade Commission, release some of the funds. So he assigned public defenders to our case, and they called it what they call a mega case, which is similar to, I think, what they would say a death penalty case. And we were given, 3 or 4 different attorneys to work on it, but not being up to speed with the business, Very, very difficult to bring people in who don't know the industry, don't know the product, don't know the entire business history, to come in and get up to speed and try to go to trial. At first time, it was almost in 6 months.
I've got a lot of respect for federal defenders, but I can't imagine what it would be like when you anticipated having to spend $20 million on your defense and levying that against a federal defender who just doesn't have that budget to really fight such a case.
No, I will say the Federal Public Defender's Office, there's some good attorneys in there, but it just doesn't have the amount of time and energy that all of the other attorneys that have been working in our business and our industry over the years. There's just no way you can replicate that, just the time alone. So it was a very, very difficult environment for them to get in here and get up to speed. You're talking about almost 20 years. You're talking about millions of emails. It goes on and on and on.
Did you ever contemplate taking a deal?
No. We were very, very firm in our belief and our business model and everything that we've done over the years. And even my attorneys, one of the good things is I had a new set of attorneys come in and look at this, just not the ones that always work for me. And they even said, this is a very defensible case. So to answer your question, no. Would I have taken a deal if it would have made sense?
Very difficult, Scott. I got to say, to be a billionaire and going and having 12 members of your peers. I don't think, did you have 12 billionaires on the jury pool, or what were your thoughts of your interpretation of the jury?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult environment, and
What did you know about the members of your jury?
Well, when we went to trial, they vetted them openly with questionnaires and things like that, but you just don't really know that much about them.
What more did you do? Generally, get an idea of their careers and their business, and it's my understanding that members of the jury are frequently honorable people, but they're generally, not high net worth people. High net worth people, unfortunately, find a way to get off of juries.
That's very true, and my experience with the court mirrored that. And for someone to get on our jury that was a CEO of a large company that was involved in very technical and legal topics and issues, it's very difficult to find anybody that can even sit through 3 or 4 weeks of that and listen to it and understand it.
It would be very difficult for any member of society to really understand the complexities of a business that generated millions of separate transactions, particularly in the short span of a trial. And tell us a little bit about what your jury decided when the judge asked for a verdict.
Well, unfortunately, in our situation, we were in trial for 6.5 weeks. The prosecution was up for about 3, and then our defense was up for about 3. And the jury instructions were almost 70 pages, and it took the judge 4 hours to read them. It was very, very difficult to understand, and I don't even know how to describe it. It just made it so complicated that nobody could even really come out with anything definitive. And, unfortunately, I think a lot of people, when it gets too complicated, they just give up on it.
And what was the verdict?
Verdict was guilty, all counts.
Guilty on all counts. And what happened? I mean, you're sitting here talking to me right now. You're guilty on all counts. Has the government issued a amount of loss?
Not yet. That'll be coming up in the next week, but we anticipate that'll be in the $6 billion range.
$6 billion range. So what kind of time have your attorneys conditioned you to be thinking about?
185 years.
185 years, and yet you're on home confinement. You've been home for how long now?
We got convicted on Friday, the 13th of October, believe it or not. And we are sitting here today, the 18th of December.
And you're expected to get sentenced when?
January 5th.
So in our next episode, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about your experience on home confinement. But before we end this first segment where we've been speaking with Scott Tucker, the founder or one of the pioneers of the payday lending industry, he built a business from scratch to employ thousands of people, to generate billions of dollars in revenues and perhaps billions of dollars in taxable revenues that went to fund police departments, fire departments, infrastructure, schools, and yet he is looking now at 185 years in prison. May I ask you, Scott, just one last question. Where do you go to get guidance and advice when you're facing a challenge like that?
It's a very, very difficult environment. As you can imagine, your head's going all kinds of different places. What I found was speaking with someone like you who'd been through this experience has been incredible for me. You're so used to listening to your attorneys, and it's very difficult for them to give you real guidance because most of them have never been through anything like this. They've had clients that have, but I found that dealing with someone of your caliber and your experience, you made the difference for me, because I don't know.
I don't know that I've made the difference for you, Scott, but I am so glad and privileged for you to have shared your story with us. I want to learn more. We're going to have continue with a series of episodes about the amazing journey of Scott Tucker. Next, in our next episode, we'll be talking a little bit about his experience on home confinement and his preparations for that really frightening sentencing hearing where his lawyers have told him to anticipate the potential sentence of 185 years in federal prison. Then I would like to spend some time on learning a little bit more about Scott's amazing business mind to start a business from startup and taking it to such an extraordinary level of success in the community. There must be many lessons that those of us at the Prison Professors audience can learn from. But I do hope that you have found some value in this message today. It is one of that should cause ample concern for people who are encountering troubles with the criminal justice system. Scott, do you have any final words before we can close this final episode?
No, I appreciate the time, Michael, and I look forward to talking to you again.
We are going to profile Scott Tucker's story. I look forward to writing various segments about it because I'm inspired by him, by his strength of being able to stare down a potential sentence of a century in prison and yet still keep his dignity intact and not be frightened about it. We're going to hear just how he has prepared himself on home confinement in our next episode. This is it for Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and look forward to sharing a little bit more about the Scott Tucker story in our next episode. Thank you. Hey, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's see. See, it went smoothly. Let's see.